Today, I am joined by the author and illustrator of one of the most beautiful books I've had the pleasure of being sent, The Joy Journal for Grown-Ups, Laura Brand. Welcome, Laura.
Hello. Hi, Lucy. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on and for such a beautiful book. I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous. We're going to talk more about your fantastic book, but could you start by introducing yourself and telling our listeners what you think they should know about you?
Oh, yes. Okay. So I'm Laura and I have an Instagram page called The Joy Journal, which started off as a place where I just sort of put things that made me feel joy rather than, I suppose, happy, which I think obviously Happiful is where we are today. Joy was things that gave me a sort of a cozy and comforting feeling. So they were quite homespun. The things that I started sort of taking pictures of and DIY sort of things. And then what became from that was sort of doing creative projects. And then when my daughter was born, I started to engage with her. I've always been looking for ways to be a little bit more mindful in parenthood and in general adulthood. And so I started engaging her with creativity and nature, and they would be my passions. So I'm a very enthusiastic nature. I'm passionate about nature, basically. I am a creative person. So whatever, and we can talk about that more later, but I really mean that in a very varied way. I like painting, I like illustrating, but I really enjoy cooking. I enjoy making and trying new things. So that would be those sort of aspects of myself. I'm married. I have a wonderful husband who's we've known each other for a really long time. So I maybe 17 or 18 years. I have two daughters, Mabel and Peggy. They are 5 and 3. I have 2 dogs and I have 11 cats. So I am also an animal enthusiast. I also have chickens, and I enjoy sort of a rural life. But I spent my 20s living in London, so I have an experience of sort of a more fast-paced life. And at the moment, at this stage of my life, I'm trying to find ways to slow down and still be productive, but in a mindful and sort of much more slow living sort of way. So there we go. I suppose that's me.
And you describe yourself in the book as having a beautifully busy household. I mean, with 2 young girls, 11 chickens, did you say?
11 cats. Even
11
more.
cats.
Yes, I know. I mean, it started as 2 cats, then sadly went to 1 cat because our oldest cat died. And then we got another cat, and she had a litter, and then she had another litter. And of course, because we are mad as hatters here in this house, we kept 1 litter, and then she unexpectedly got pregnant quite quickly, and then we couldn't part with 2 of them. And then I recently adopted a cat from somebody that needed adopting, and so there we go. We're at 11 at the moment.
Well, that's fantastic. We're going to talk about the fact that you're surrounded by beautiful humans and animals later on, but we'll kick off with your first I am, which is a lovely one and made me smile when I read it, which is I am still the weird child. Can you tell us more about your concept of being the weird child?
Yeah, so I was really, well, my husband and I recently did a talk, chat and in conversation, if you will, at our local bookshop, and talking about my book, and my mum and dad were there, and he said to me, why don't we talk about the fact that you're a weird child? And actually he means it with enormous amounts of love, and I don't see it now, or don't see it at all, as a sort of putting myself down, but rather a sort of, I would say, I'm really coming to embrace the fact that I like my own space. I like sort of solitude. I like spending a lot of time outside. I really, really enjoyed make believe. I was very engaged in my imagination and sort of big visions for things, and sort of would start little businesses, and very entrepreneurial, even though a lot of it was probably very unappealing to the people I was selling it to. I had sort of, real like stuff we all experience, like, a lot of us anyway, mud pies and sort of that stuff. But I was always very interested in, creatures and creepy crawlies. And I would say that I would say that I'm coming home to that part of myself. And what I mean by that is, it's not like I'm now I used to collect a lot of things. So there would be a lot of collections of things. And I would say probably, if my parents would say of me, I was unusual in certain ways. I was sort of, like I said, I was quite kind of a solitary person, but I also was weirdly quite confident. So I was always doing dance routines and putting shows on. And I was very much sort of into dressing up and fancy dress sort of stuff. Almost every day I was a different person. I suppose I shifted a lot and did a lot of exploring of myself. And then what happens as you sort of get older is you fall into a much more run-of-the-mill work, doing this stuff, probably leaning towards stuff you're not intended to be doing. And then it's in sort of motherhood and in growth in myself, just through having an incredibly supportive partner who's really sort of helped me with I sort of was quite burned out when we moved to the countryside. I was burned out from living in London. I worked in hospitality. I was actually sort of running a restaurant nightclub. I needed probably a little bit of help, and I changed my life completely. I moved somewhere that's not necessarily close to all my friends, but I engage much more with an outdoor life now. And I'm really, that's probably why I'm coming back to being that person, the child that would be outside with collecting twigs and sticks and muddy hands and muddy boots and all that sort of stuff. And that is a lot of big part of my life now as an adult. So I am still that sort of child with intrigue and curiosity. And I would say now more than ever, probably. Which is unusual, because you'd think, oh, maybe you grow out of stuff. Somebody said to me the other day, Lucy, when I was collecting really nice twigs that looked lovely, and it had been like storm, it had been after that storm, and sort of a friend of mine said, like, I can't believe like how you sort of still like you're like up close looking at stuff, finding and foraging, and I get excited by stuff like lichen growing on twigs, and like I'm like really engaged by that. And that's what I mean by that sort of weird child. I'm still there. I'm still that person.
I mean, thank heavens that you are, because we wouldn't be having this conversation today, and you wouldn't have started the conversation about people finding joy in the everyday and, slowing down. And I can just imagine people listening to this, when you were talking about yourself as a child, thinking about what got them really excited when they were children. Because when I read this in your book, in your introduction, about how actually the academia left you a little bit cold, but you would go to craft club at the end of the day, and it was kind of clay and making things and chipped fingernails and finding stuff. I really felt that sense of joy, as opposed to sometimes the funnels we're pushed down in life through, whether it's school or you were talking about working in hospitality. That's quite a far cry from what really gave you joy as a child.
Yeah, it really is. And like, I actually really learned so much. And like, I certainly, I really enjoyed so much of that time, I sort of lose track of time, honestly, Lucy. Like, I'm thinking, God, what age was that? How old was I when I was doing that? Maybe between 23 and 28, I worked in restaurants, nightclubs. And so it was a very much weird hours. I missed out on a lot of socializing, but also the socializing came to me, but that's not always sort of what you want. And the last job I had before moving out of London was wonderful, actually, with a friend. But he opened a restaurant, and it was taking over an old building. And he said, will you come and do it with me? And he said, but here's the thing, we're going to do it ourselves. We're going to paint it ourselves. We're going to do it all ourselves. And I was like, I am so up for that. I can't tell you. I totally and utterly reconnected with my creative self there. Like, I mean, up on a ladder, doing ceilings, proper in overalls, splashes of paint everywhere. I've kept the clothes that are covered in paint because of this weird sort of nostalgia I have of that time, where before the restaurant opened, we would just have really long days where time seemed to just mean nothing. And we would eat biscuits, and we'd drink coffee and paint and listen to music. And we did furbish a building, basically. Not I wasn't necessarily myself doing the hammer and nails, although I'd probably turn my hand to that now, but I was, properly painting, and I felt very, very proud of it at the end. And weirdly, then you go into the actual job, which for me was managing and stock take and managing people, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm lost again a little bit, to be honest. And I hadn't done anything like that. I went to art college. I went to university for a year to do art, and I didn't make it to doing a degree because I just couldn't quite hold my attention, the sort of structure of university life, and I didn't really want to be away from London or my friends or anything. So I didn't, but I came back to that in that sort of project, and that was my last sort of hospitality job. And it's weird because it had that element of creativity, but then went straight into being something very full on. And I think that's probably more than anything what made me realize I think I need to explore the creativity side a little bit more.
It's interesting, that idea that we, things can pique our interest, and in our gut we have that feeling, this is what I love, this is what I should be doing. And then suddenly when it's thrown into contrast with what we are doing. And Happiful, we get a lot of people, we have the life coach directory as well as the magazine, people talking about this kind of coming back to something later on in life, kind of getting to their 30s, their 40s, and feeling like perhaps they've gone down a different path to the one that they started to, and making those changes. I mean, you have done that. And do you get a lot of feedback from people who feel like they have perhaps reached a point of burnout, and the work that you do actually allows them to reconnect with that younger or more joyful part of themselves?
Yeah, so thank you, because I love talking about this, because it's and also it's that idea that we are allowed still in adulthood to play, and it's quite hard to remember and to do that and to feel like we're making the most of our time. But I hope that with this particular book, the idea is to invite people to try to get into that sort of creative mode and play, and it not necessarily result in these big final end products or projects and things like that, but just to give things a go, and have a go. It's anecdotal, so that sort of, I hope, makes people feel a little bit sort of more softened to it, and it's not sort of rigid. But where I really felt what you're saying was when my book, The Joy Journal for Magical Everyday Play, came out. I had so many messages from lovely people that either had children, or it was the aunts and uncles or the grannies in some cases. And they said, like, doing these sort of old-fashioned things with my kids, or getting outside and making a nature trail without having to buy loads of stuff, but having to sort of use a little bit of imagination, but more than anything, just being sort of permitted to do it in this way where it's a bit slapdash and a bit sort of like, let's just have a go, seemed to have an effect on people that was nourishing and nostalgic for them, and that they were sort of, I guess they were being given a permission that they hadn't allowed themselves. And I think that everything moves so fast and everything seems so fast paced that I don't know if we find the time to do it. So with the inspiration from the feedback I got with book one, I sort of started working on what would work for book two, if it was for not for children but for grown-ups or families, but more aimed at like things I used to like doing and wanted to learn. So, candle making, soap making, homemade products, and then also the things like, painted glass, or doing things that are a bit more crafty and a bit more like you could gift someone, or, it's sort of like, just the idea is to try. I heard someone say this recently, and I've really been using it a lot, like a joyful beginner, being really in a place of joy, but being like open to the fact that you've never done it before, or that it might go wrong, or that, whatever. That's the thing I'm trying to encourage. And I have to do it with myself too, because it can be scary to try new things,
It really can. And joyful beginner is beautiful, because I think we are a culture, and I've been talking about this a lot recently, and sometimes you have lots of conversations in a row where the themes keep on coming out, and this one about productivity and kind of toxic productivity seems to keep on coming to the fore, which is, if we do something, it's almost like we need to be good at it. And actually sometimes it's okay to just do it, enjoy it, and it not be great.
Yeah, exactly. It's what they call, well, like in children's or early years learning, it's like process. For example, you'd call it process art. So when you get a child to make something, or you encourage them or invite them to make something, but you don't really necessarily have an end product, it's more the idea of what are they going into, what state are they in when they're doing it. So rather than focusing on no, it's got to look like this, it's got to look like this, it has to be, are they enjoying it in the moment? And if they're not, let go of it. If you're not enjoying it, if you're not able to, or rather surrender to it. So if you feel like you're not good at it and it's causing stuff to come up for you, then probably you might have to push through, but you have to know you're not necessarily going to be holding up, something like a Picasso piece, or it probably might even be better than that, and it's going to take you by surprise. But like it's definitely that process, and I think that's really, really important. And I think what you said there about toxic productivity, I think we're probably all guilty of thinking like we've got to work, we've got to get this thing at the end. And I'm interested in learning about sort of slow productivity. How can you be productive but not lose the authenticity?
That is something that I think is a conversation that we really need to delve into. And your next I am learning. And one of the things that I picked up again from your book was actually after you'd had your two beautiful children, that you learnt to teach hypnobirthing, which was really fascinating to me, but also that you used it yourself at one point when you were very, very stressed to learn to slow down your breathing, that you could use that kind of slowness. Tell us about the importance to you of learning and also embracing that slower mindset.
Well, really, I would say it's a weird sort of thing with learning, because as I do write about in the book, I didn't always have the easiest time at school. I found concentration terrible. I really struggled. Also, I got labeled sort of, dyslexic at like 13, and I didn't really see how, it was helpful because they gave you assisted learning for exams and things, but really what it sort of, I felt it almost did was like gave me an excuse not to be as good as everybody. And where I'd suffered really was maths was the main thing. So I sort of applied that to everything and sort of said, well, I'm not good at maths, so I'm not going to be good at this, and I'm not going to be. But actually, I had a real thirst for learning and education, and I feel sort of sadly it sort of dropped out when I became aware of having this sort of thing that was like holding me back. And I'd say there were definitely a few years of my life where I was on some rails and I was just going for it with jobs and not probably certainly learning, but I used to take that as being like learning on the job, which used to cause a lot of stress, because I'd put myself in compromising positions of like, having never managed a restaurant before, I was suddenly a breakfast manager in one of the busiest restaurants in West London. I'd be like, right, what am I doing? How do I do it? End of shift report, and actually I was thankfully really guided by some great people. But then what happened was I went back to having ideas about something. So when I was, like I was talking about before, burned out from a job, I decided to learn massage, for example, because I realized I hadn't really done anything. First of all, I wanted to do something calming. I'd always been interested in doing something which was mind-body related, so a bit more physicality and touch. And I went off and I learned, and I got like a massage certificate, Indian head massage and Reiki healing. And then it's not like I don't really I use it on myself and I use it on my children, and my family benefit from it. I didn't intend for it to be my job, but I felt like what I started going into in my late 20s was this want for equipping myself with things I felt that I couldn't really do or I didn't have time to do before. So I started to sort of like, I would do, I did this massage course, and then I was like, wow, I've got this new skill set where I can use my hands in a different way, and like for myself as well, learning about the body again. And I realized, God, I wish I'd listened more at school. Like, I really find anatomy fascinating. And so then when I became pregnant, I went through a whole new learning again about anatomy. I sort of thought birth would be one way, and I quickly learned it was not going to be like that for me, because I was very, very sick and I needed to focus a lot of on mindfulness. So my husband and I did a hypnobirthing course, just to learn so that we could have some breathing techniques and fear release work for the birth of our first daughter. And then I just really took to it, and then applied those techniques to the birth of my second daughter. And after that, I thought, even though this has nothing to do with what I'm doing elsewhere in my life, at that point I was a full-time mum, but I was like, I don't know how I'm going to apply this. I'm going to learn hypnobirthing, because I want the skill set to be able to teach others, so that if I ever meet a person that fears birth, I feel like I'm actually able to converse about it in a way that benefits us both, or them. And what happened then, I now teach like a few couples a year, not a huge amount. I do it for passion, and I do it for not really my own enjoyment, but more so that I just absolutely love seeing people learning new things at this stage in life. And so I do that alongside whatever else I'm doing. I love learning in adulthood, like learning a craft or a skill, having to sort of rephrase the I'm not good at to how do I do that? Show me how, and asking someone how to do something. It's sort of, we've come out of that. It's not natural to us so much in adulthood. So I'm going on a whole new world of discovery with learning new things all the time.
And what's lovely is listening to you and how passionate you are about it, but also how deeply curious you are. And I think that's something that maybe you were talking about when you were 13 and you were labelled as dyslexic. I think when we're younger, those kind of labels can almost stop our curiosity, because we've been given a definitive. And actually opening up into, like you said, massage and hypnobirthing, and finding all of these beautiful ways of learning and applying it to yourself and gifting that to other people, like your creativity as well, that has so much value that isn't financial or, status. But passing on that knowledge from a place of curiosity is a really beautiful thing to do.
It is, thank you. And I really enjoy doing it. And I really enjoy also, it's sort of quite traditional in a way to sort of skill share. So like, for example, if you think about what would happen really, really kind of a long time ago, it would be that you would sort of live in a community and you would all have a different sort of skill, and you would bring it in together to create a cohesive community where things are working and running, and you'd all have a different thing. And like, for example, I really like when I meet someone and they've got like a sort of a secret skill in something. So like I work with someone, she's called Jade, she's wonderful, and I sort of learned after not too long of us working together that she's like an incredible crocheter, like incredible. She can make full outfits. She can make like, it blew my mind. And I was like, where did you learn? And she went, I just taught myself on YouTube. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, right, okay, well, this is what and then like weirdly, just after that, I met this girl that works in like a shop in my local town, and it's a sort of sofa shop, and she just sort of she'd maybe followed me on Instagram or something, and she goes, oh, I've also got this other business where I knit, like, and I was just like looking at her stuff, I was like, people have such incredible skills that aren't necessarily at the forefront, because you can't maybe pay rent just with that at that point of your life. You might be able to if you create a business, if you could create a business model with it. But I'm really interested in these like these crafty skills that people have that they can bring to so much joy to other people, and so, yeah, I really I think it's really important in adulthood more than anything to have hobbies and pursue things and be with whatever the thing is that makes us feel that joy, and just go with it and see what happens. You might become an incredible person that can knit all your clothes for the rest of your life, and you won't even know you've got it unless you try.
Exactly. Unless you try, you will never know. And I think there's even more reasons now to give things a go. And I'm noticing more and more on TV, we're seeing programs like, the Great Pottery Throwdown or the Sewing Bee. And although those are...
And the repair shop, it's
yeah. And although those are kind of at a very high level, I guess, those are people who are doing it for a long time. I can imagine that, and I've certainly seen it. We've got a quilting shop and a sewing shop where I live, and I have definitely seen that they have become more popular and people are going along, because it's in there every day, the idea that they could create or do something beautiful, which I think is great.
I think so too. And like, I think it's that people are heading towards wanting to become more resourceful. So like the idea that you can do your own stuff. So a lot of the stuff, like, even though it might be quite, it's like I always used to say, people probably thought it was a bit kitsch. I always made people cards, or I always gifted people things that were homemade. Well, not always, but most often, and sometimes it was because I genuinely couldn't afford to buy loads of presents, and sometimes it was that I just felt, what do I get this person? Well, if I make it, it's going to be so original, so it's going to be, and I think that that's becoming much more acceptable now, right? It's not so much like, oh, Granny's knitted me a jumper. Now it's like, Granny knit me a jumper. It's cool now, so I think that, like, I think the idea that we can create this world for ourselves where we do make our own, right, to, if you are a non-dairy drinker and you can make your own oat milk, it might be quite long and arduous and complex, but sort of this idea that you can get something and create something else from it, I think is much more commonly accepted now amongst this sort of generation, and probably, I don't know, because I'm not so much I don't really know what the younger generation are doing, but we obviously didn't always have the social media we had, or we have now, sorry. So I don't, my hope is that people will still keep up with that person-on-person interaction and community and skill sharing. Probably Instagram really helps it, actually, in some ways, because you get to see what other people are doing and you connect with people all over the world. But yeah, I really enjoy that resourcefulness of people. I think people have so much to offer and are only giving half of that to the world because they feel either underconfident or they're not equipped enough to do it, in terms of they don't have the time. Someone said recently, like, there was a comment under a picture or something of my book, where someone was like, yeah, if you've got loads of time and you don't have a job, you could do these things. And I'm like, well, hopefully the idea would be that some of these things take 2 minutes, and if you don't have 2 minutes to do anything for yourself, anything, then there's a bigger problem. There's a bigger problem than me having a craft book.
There really is a bigger problem. And you talk about, creativity and crafting being self-care. And one of the things that popped into my head when I read that is about making time for that kind of self-care, where you get in the flow of something where you're really enjoying it. And I remember making myself a wreath at Christmas. It's one of the things I love to do. And time goes by so quickly. It just kind of disappears. But also, at the same time, it's really contrasting. But I have a timer on my phone for my social media, which is an hour a day. And every single day without fail, I ignore that timer. I press ignore. And I know part of it is for work, but that's part of my reasoning. That's part of my kind of, I guess that's my excuse to myself. But if I took that time and did something creative, it would be much more valuable than scrolling through someone I don't know, a reel they've made about somewhere they went that I know nothing about.
I know, it's interesting, because I think every person I know has that timer on their phone, and they all ignore it, and we all ignore it. And I don't know how we would, but you're right. How do we shift that mindset from like ignore, keep going on Instagram, to actually just like going, because even sometimes I'm like, God, I wonder if people will buy my book, because you can access everything on the internet. But actually the idea would be, obviously it's a completely unique thing because I've written it. So I've written it in a way that's different to even probably how I post on Instagram. But that idea that you can log off, and have something that's more like a reference book, and then you can hopefully you get your own notebook and you make your own notes and you take it further, and you're not scrolling. I started, so talking of learning, I'm learning the piano. So now, so I used to play when I was younger, and my kids do piano lessons. So I thought, why not? I'm not sure. I had a sort of ear for it when I was younger, and I just, again, my concentration and my inability to sit still prevented me from going very far. So I thought 3 years ago I wanted to start, and then this year I started. So I started learning the piano, and my piano teacher, I only do, by the way, it's like 45 minutes a week or every other week. You know, it's not even, it's quite a big commitment because I want to learn a skill and you need to practice all the time. But one thing we noted was that the use of the fingers. So because we're used to scrolling and looking at our phone, we're out of practice with some of our hand skills and our ability to, like, for example, if I wanted to reach a note, some of us don't have, I'm having to retrain my fingers to work in a different way to play the piano because I'm used to being on the phone too much. So that was where I was like, oh my God, you know, what are we going to do? What are we going to do?
I'm looking completely shocked because, yeah, I can imagine that is an issue. And I know that I've had back and shoulder issues because of the way that I use my body every single day. And I used to write a lot by hand. You know, I would start to write things by hand, and I don't do that so much anymore. So when I do, if I write something longhand, you know, you kind of get the, it's like when you get the ache. So that has given me a mental note to go back and start to do that more. And
yeah,
I think that's what your book does, though. It's tactile and it's beautiful, and it does allow you to go online, but also to get lost in looking through different things that you can do and see what piques your interest at that particular time. And we need that. We need not to be looking at screens all the time. We need to let our imagination out. And that's your next I Am is about being creative. And you say that you get joyful when you're creative. Can you tell us a bit more about that? I mean, we've talked about creativity.
Well, I suppose, like, on a basic level, when I start to engage in something that's like making and doing, I just sort of lose myself in the moment. So I find creative activities, if you will, because it's not always like, I'm not like we've talked about, I'm not necessarily producing something, but it could be anything from like laying the table to, you know, cooking a meal is a good example. If you're really into it, and it's not, because we're so boring cooking all the time for, especially, let me tell you, for 5 and 3-year-olds who don't want to eat anything other than pesto pasta. But like when you sort of go, right, I'm going to do a bit of batch cooking. Batch cooking is one of my favorite things because I'm quite kind of, I like to organize the cooking. So it's like, usually I'm making it up. I'll use like a base. I have got some real go-to books, but if I'm making it up, it's sort of about like, I'm going to do my chopping and then put it in the things, and then I'll make the bat and then freeze it. And I know that I've got this thing, again, it's that sort of idea of a little bit of organization, but just more the process. So even that sort of creativity of like thinking about what to put in a dish, like a stew or whatever it is that you're making, a soup, I sort of just go into a sort of a rhythm with it. And that same thing applies when I'm making Play-Doh with my children, or if I'm making a wreath like you did. You know, there's a wreath for any time of year in this book, and I made one for Easter last year, and it stayed on the door for absolutely ages because I put bulbs on it so they came to life, and it was amazing. It was such a beautiful thing to sort of watch, and I couldn't believe I'd made it. I was like, I can't believe I've made this, you know, like, you know, it's sort of, you feel really proud of the thing. And so how could that not give you some joy when it's the feeling of losing yourself for a bit? And so, like, a good example of this would be that 2 or 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago maybe, I had hosted a brunch for a group of women, and it was around the time my book was coming out. I was very, very nervous. I haven't done anything like that for a while. I do get a little bit of anxiety, and I have to work on that with my hypnobirthing breathing, which always does help. But in this case, it was just because I was coming into London and I don't live in London, so it's a bit of a journey, and there was just a few layers before getting there and getting into it. And as soon as I started setting the tables for these women and creating what I was creating, a still lifescape down the tables. So spring things, forage things. My friend's a florist, so she'd got me flowers, and it was beautiful, working with really beautiful materials. As soon as I went into this state of sort of creating, even though it wasn't like I had to put a lot of thought in, I was just like, right, let's put that there and do this. I was like, wow, my anxiety's like just seeping away. It's lifting, it's going. And I felt by the time I had done that, completely ready for what I was going to do. And it's weird because it happened by chance, because I was going to get my friend to do it for me, because I thought I'll be too rushed, I'll be too busy, I've got to travel 2 hours, I'm not going to be able to. And so she actually couldn't do it in the end. And it was sort of, in a way, kind of wonderful, because I love creating tablescapes. So I got to do that, and it worked as my mindful practice and my meditation before doing something that I felt quite nervous about. And so that's what I mean by feeling kind of joy when I'm in creativity. I'm in a flow state, like I'm, you know, and that really varies. I can't even, it really can be anything from, you know, like noticing colors in nature to cooking, like I said, or even in writing. And it can be quite hard to dedicate time to writing because you get there are distractions and things like that. But when you find that flow, it's like you don't want to stop, and you're like, oh my god, it's dinner time, oh my god, it's bedtime, you know. It's like you lose track, and you know, that's what I mean by that. I'm in joy when I'm in creativity.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think our listeners and readers of Happiful magazine will really get something from that. And also in terms of anxiety, finding the thing that takes you out of that anxiety, but also into a place of joy and focus. And I think that's what creativity can do, whether it is, like you said, you know, creating that springscape. For me, when you were talking about it, I was imagining, you know, something coming out of nothing, that kind of beautifully satisfying feeling of starting with nothing and it building into something. And I can imagine that brought a lot of joy for people coming in the room. And what was the response to, because I assume that they were doing a workshop.
Yeah,
did you see that joy?
I did actually, like I really did. And actually someone said, gosh, it's nice to be offered an opportunity to play, because I'd given everyone painting materials and people were like, oh no, am I painting? And I was like, yeah, you're painting. You better start, like, get going, you know, have a go. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about the end product. Don't worry about anyone else, what anyone else is doing. You've all got a different viewpoint. So you're going to have different things in front of you. And it was an exercise from the Gather section of the book. So it's a sociable still life. And one of the ladies just said, God, it's so nice to play. It was a Monday morning, and I know that a lot of people were rushing to get there, and I know a lot of people had a lot on that week, and it was a busy time because it's coming up to Easter holidays. And I got a really nice feedback of like, God, it set my Monday off differently. Like having that sort of Monday set my week off differently, you know, just started me off in a different state of joy, actually.
Permission to play as an adult is a lovely thing to have, isn't it?
It is. It really is. Yeah.
Really beautiful. And we're going to move on to what I have, which is I have such beautiful humans and animals around me. Now, you touched on this earlier. Talk about your beautiful humans and animals.
Well, the beautiful humans is that, like, you know, when you just think, some days I just really think, my gosh, everyone I've come into contact with today, and like, it's, I live sort of in a rural place, so but I even, like, you know, and you can go into the local shop, and I've become friends with the ladies from the local shop. We go swimming together, and you know, or river swimming as well, so we do something quite bracing together.
Lovely.
Yeah, all year round. And you know, and I just feel very, very grateful, and I really truly mean that, of the friendships that I've had for a long time and what they offer me still, and the feeling that, you know, I now am at the point where I've got these friendships, like I'm sure a lot of us have, where time passes. We've had these 2 years of probably not seeing many people regularly, or some people not at all if we're on the other side of the world or whatever, and how you can go back to just it being like, wow, we don't need to excuse ourselves, or we don't need to feel anything like resentful or whatever. And usually those relationships don't last, you know, if you do have to have that sort of burden in them. And so I feel very, very, when I was thinking about that, what I was thinking, I was like, so I don't know what to say. And I was like, I have an abundance of really amazing people around me. You know, I work with amazing people. I really adore my family members. I have great friends who, and like, it's not like, you know, it seems so cheesy, but it's true. And when I was writing that for you, I literally did have a cat on my lap, and I thought, oh, I've got to say the animals too, because they give me so, like, honestly, I even said to my husband last night, where my oldest cat was with me on the bed, and I was like, I love this cat so much. Like, I'm not even sure if it's like normal. I mean, obviously, like, you have cat people. I'm fully a cat person, but also a dog as well, but or dogs. But like, I'm particularly, I think, because the cats just come and curl up, and then they lie there, and you can be in their presence, and they don't really need much. It's a very low maintenance sort of loving relationship. And I sort of do feel like, gosh, yeah, I have to include all my animals in that, because I adore them, and they make me, that's like animal therapy in our house. Like, I get a lot from sort of being around them.
I'm completely with you. I actually posted a picture the other week because I realized I'd got stuff to do and I'd just been watching my dog sleep.
Yeah, honestly, I completely and utterly understand that. Like, I think at the time that as I was writing this book, and our cat had had the litter of kittens, and I had to write to an email to my amazing editor, saying like, I'm so sorry, but I've literally spent the whole day looking at kittens. I can't finish this book. Like, I've literally been like staring at these tiny little things and like can't. And they were like, "Oh no, we understand, and we understand." I waste a lot of time with animals, but not wasted really.
It's not, and it comes back to what you were saying about finding the wonder when you go out in nature, you know, and you're looking at twigs. And I think that's the same thing with animals. You know, they're with us all the time, but they're so different and they bring a different energy and a different feeling. So it's, you know, it's absolutely normal that we'd be so interested and invested in their lives and that energy that they bring. And we've come to the end of the podcast, but I've got one final question, which is if you could meet Laura in 10 years from now, what do you hope future Laura would say to you?
Oh, future Laura. Gosh, what would I hope? Oh my gosh, that's a really tricky one, because usually you're like, you know, what would you say to your younger self? So what would the future Laura say to me? Let me think about this for a second. Well, to be honest, I hope that they'll say that I would say just keep going on the path that I'm on, you know, now, because I do feel like I'm aligned with what I want to be doing. And I think that always, I was having a very long conversation with my husband about this last night, because we were really going into this idea of just like being completely confident in the thing that you're trying to do and say, and like you're being kind of as authentic as possible, and knowing that there's something coming through, and to trust that, and to keep following it, you know, and not to feel shy or embarrassed about myself. So I think that would be it, just to keep going on the path that I'm on at the moment, and unfurl.
That's a beautiful answer, a beautiful way to put it. And we've come to the end of the podcast. So could you share more about your book and where people can find you online?
Yes, of course. So my book is called The Joy Journal for Grown-Ups, and it's 50 homemade craft ideas to inspire creativity and connection. Lovely Melissa Hemsley wrote the foreword, which was a real joy. So she provides a lot of meals and joy for our home. And I'm on Instagram at The Joy Journal, and that's where I post events that I have coming up, of which I have a few. The link in my bio there has a variety of places you can buy the book. I do like to say to people, buy it in your local bookstore if you have one. But obviously you can get it elsewhere as well. So that's me.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for today, Laura.
Thank you, Lucy. You've been wonderful, and you've made me feel so comfortable and happyful.